Some artists don't just react to stories. They absorb them, turn them over in their minds, and quietly measure them against the kind of truth they believe art should carry. Billie Eilish has always existed in that space. Her credibility doesn't come from volume or spectacle, but from restraint, sensitivity, and an instinct for emotional honesty. So when her response to Moana 2026 began circulating, it didn't land like a headline. It lingered like a thought you couldn't shake. What stood out immediately wasn't excitement or nostalgia, it was recognition. The sense that she wasn't watching a sequel trying to repeat its own magic, but a story attempting to grow up alongside its audience. At one point, she summed it up simply: "It feels braver." That wasn't praise tossed lightly. Coming from someone who has built an entire career on choosing emotional risk over safety, that word carried weight. Her reaction settled on the scale of the film, not in terms of visuals, but intention. Moana 2026 doesn't feel interested in proving it's bigger, it feels determined to be deeper. The story reaches further into questions of identity, responsibility, and the cost of listening to your inner voice when it no longer whispers, but demands. Billie's commentary circled around that shift, the way the film trusts its audience to sit with uncertainty instead of rushing toward comfort. She didn't dwell on plot points. Instead, she focused on tone, on how the film allows quiet moments to exist without apology. That restraint mattered to her. In her words, it doesn't explain everything, it lets things be felt. And that observation became the lens through which everything else made sense. The film's ambition isn't loud, it's patient. It assumes the viewer is capable of emotional interpretation rather than passive consumption. When the conversation turned to the emotional core of the story, Billie acknowledged how the film handles growth, not as a victory montage, but as something messy and unresolved. Moana isn't chasing destiny this time, she's negotiating with it. That distinction resonated. There's a maturity in allowing a character to evolve without polishing away doubt, and Billie clearly saw herself reflected in that choice. Not the hero who conquers fear, but the one who learns to coexist with it. Her appreciation for the cast emerged naturally, without fanfare. She spoke about commitment, how performances felt grounded rather than performative. "You can tell they care," she said once, casually, as if that were the highest compliment available. And, in many ways, it is. The voices carrying this story don't feel like they're filling roles. They feel like they're carrying weight. Cultural weight, emotional weight, narrative responsibility. She acknowledged the challenge of honoring a story so deeply rooted in heritage while still allowing it to evolve. That balance is fragile, and she recognized the effort it takes to get it right. The performances, in her view, never lean into exaggeration. They respect silence, they respect history, and they trust the audience to meet them halfway. That trust, she implied, is what gives the film its quiet power. Music, unsurprisingly, became part of her reflection, but not in the way people might expect. She didn't analyze melodies or production. She talked about how the music feels embedded in the story rather than layered on top of it. It doesn't interrupt, she noted. It listens. For someone who treats sound as emotional architecture, that distinction mattered. The songs don't demand attention. They deepen the emotional current already moving beneath the story. What fascinated her most was how Moana 2026 resists the pressure to be endlessly reassuring. The film doesn't rush to resolve every tension. It allows characters to make imperfect choices and live with them. That honesty, Billie suggested, is what makes the story feel alive. Not polished, not flawless, but real in the way growth usually is. She touched briefly on how the film speaks to younger audiences without talking down to them. There's a confidence in that approach, a belief that kids can handle complexity, and that adults haven't outgrown animated stories, they've just been waiting for ones that don't underestimate them. Billie's own work has always blurred that line, and she clearly saw that same philosophy at play here. What made her reaction linger wasn't enthusiasm, but respect. respect for a creative team willing to take emotional risks, respect for performers who understood the responsibility of continuing a story that means so much to so many, and respect for a film that knows when to be expansive and when to pull back. As the conversation continued, it became clear why her voice mattered in this conversation. Billie isn't someone who reacts loudly. When something moves her, it's because it earned that reaction through sincerity. Her response reframed Moana 2026 not as a sequel chasing legacy, but a story confident enough to challenge it. And maybe that's why this reaction feels important, not because it tells us what to think, but because it invites us to look closer, to expect more from stories that claim to be for everyone, to believe that animated films can still surprise us, not with spectacle, but with truth. If Moana 2026 can leave an artist like Billie Eilish quietly reflective rather than loudly impressed, it suggests the film isn't just continuing a journey, it's asking a question, one that lingers long after the credits fade. Are we ready for a story that trusts us to feel more than we're told?